to the Christian Car Guy radio show.
I say this calls for action, and now.
Yes, you cover me. Yes, sir. I am the righteousness of God. Oh, yes, you cover me. Yes, sir. I am the righteousness of God.
Fall back. Car Canopies today on the Christian Car Guy show, as we are having that Saturday where you get an extra hour sleep tomorrow. But this Car Canopies idea, it just blesses me no end. It's absolutely one of the neatest things that God has shown me this morning. I hope that you get a chance to enjoy it as much as I do. Again, that's Frank Edwards, and that's the Nigerian wedding dance. It's called Under the Canopy. And, you know, if you ever went to a Jewish wedding, and I hope you have, you'll note that they use something called a huppah, which is many weddings, they'll make it under a canopy, but this huppah is a very special type of canopy that is a picture of what God has for us when he will tabernacle with us, this idea of a covering that's over the top. And it represents so much of the idea of grace. And so very wonderfully, I have Bill Mixon with me today, and he's looking up at the sky like, Robbie, you'll make sense eventually.
Well, let's hope.
All right, well, let's just get back to a wedding, okay? Because, you know, as it tells us in the book of Revelation that we will marry Jesus. I mean, we need to say yes to the dress. We are the bride of Christ. Come on, Bill. You know, those wedding clothes, it's a big deal. And this wedding is this union with God is part of the communion that we get to do. And we meet with God under this canopy. And when you are really at the mercy, so to speak, when you have that sweet communion with God, it is in the tabernacle to some extent. And they were pictured this beautifully in the tabernacle itself. There was the Holy of Holies and the Ark of the Covenant and what they would call the mercy seat. And we know that our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. And so as we tabernacle with God, our Holy of Holies is literally our heart. And if you remember, inside that ark was the rod that budded. It was Aaron's staff. And that's a picture of the shepherd, right? The shepherd that's guiding us. It's Jesus. It was the first fruits. In fact, in the beginning of the book of Jeremiah, you'll see one of the first visions that he sees is this almond branch. And the almond branch is the first thing that buds in Israel. And so this idea of the first fruits, which is Jesus, and this staff is very important to think about, that's inside of our tabernacle here in our hearts, is this staff. Jesus is in there, okay? Then you have the manna, right? And I'm hoping you're like me and you have a chance to share in that every single morning, that it's new. It's every single morning it's new. It's for that day. And then you get a double portion, you know, on your Sabbath, however you work about doing that. And then there's the law. And he said he would write his law on your hearts. And again, his word, as you get that more and more and more in your heart, the more that you tabernacle with him, the more you're beginning to see, in my view, and what I'm trying to explain today is under the car canopy, is this idea of grace. Because if you look at the word grace in Hebrew, and this is, I wouldn't spend this much time on it if it wasn't so amazingly beautiful that I just revel in it. I bask in it. I can't tell you how much I enjoy thinking about it, is this idea that the first letter in the word grace is a picture of this canopy. It's called a het. You can hear the H sound, and if you were to look at it, it's not unlike a H, except it doesn't, the top of it is, you know, is like a canopy. And so the idea of that letter is that is in fact this place where you tabernacle with God. And it's essentially, when you describe how it was written, as a picture, because all Hebrew letters are a picture. It's a male energy or light coming down, and the female would then reflect that energy back. So it's it's actually the sixth and seventh letters of the alphabet make the eighth letter of the alphabet in the case of Hebrew. So the six letters of Vav, that's a male energy coming down, it's light. The female energy coming up is called a Zion, and across the top they have a special character that is like the top of that tent. And again, being three is this idea of being united in God in marriage. And the letter means union in Hebrew in all sorts of different ways. Well, that is the first letter in the word grace, which is spectacular to me that, Jesus would ever consider, right, adoring me, that he would consider marrying me. And just like he said in that song, I have this unbelievable trust in him because of how he has treated me. And that idea of grace, if you've ever experienced it, if you've ever seen it in somebody where they just loved on you in spite of however the shenanigans that you may have been involved in, and they had faith in you in spite of all the things that you may have let them down in. I mean, this is this idea. And so that first letter is a het, and the second letter is the letter nun. And it is a picture of a seed being planted, but very much so in faith. Because when you plant a seed and you begin to water it, you're hoping, man, that the thing's going to grow up and be a beautiful tree. And in order to have fruit, you got to have a seed and you got to have ground. and so when you put these two letters together, you get this idea of grace. And so the idea that Jesus has faith in me is beyond my comprehension, but he does. He adores me more than I can imagine. And so this idea of the canopy, when you're tabernacling with God in this place of grace, it's amazingly fruitful. As he would tell us, that if you abide in me, you will be able to bear much fruit, John, right, 15:5. But apart from me, what can you do, Bill?
Nothing.
Correct. And so a car is an amazing opportunity to have some great tabernacle time. I don't know if you've experienced that, but early on, I would drive a great deal because I was running a dealership in Greensboro, but I lived in Raleigh, and so I drove every day all that time, and I put the Bible, I listened to Christian radio a lot, but I also had the Bible on tape, and I would just soak in that every single day, go through the Bible again and again and again. And I actually think I went through the Bible on tape maybe 7 or 8 times during those years I was doing that commute. And as I soaked in that tabernacle, right, then I experienced more and more of his grace as his words helped me see who he was and helped me see who I am. And I began to see that essentially there is a God and I'm not him. And so, it's an amazing thing. And so today's show, I'm hoping you will call in like some amazing prayer time or some amazing fruit that you experienced while you were driving around in your car canopy. And to do that, you would call us at 866-348-7884, 866-348-7884. And it's actually the case, Bill, that the Jesus labor love itself was due to some car canopy time on my part. I was coming back from the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, and I was praying the whole way. I mean, what opportunity to spend time with Jesus, right? You're in a car, you're on a long trip, and I'm like, God, I know you want more out of the Christian Car Guy show than what we got going on here. And, would you begin to plant that in my mind? Well, I was listening to a Christian radio station out of Knoxville, Tennessee, and these people got on that were talking about helping single moms and widows with house repair. And as I listened to them, it was just pretty obvious that God was putting it on my heart to start the Jesus Labor Love. The same idea. It was canopy time, and that we would help single moms and widows. I came back and met with Jerry, our Christian Body Shop guy, and met with Bob Young, and we began the process of starting the Jesus Labor Love, which has borne unbelievable fruit. When you think of what God did with that canopy time. So I bet you got something that you experienced that God showed you while you had some car canopy time. 866-348-7884, 866-34-TRUTH. So, Bill?
I remember that we'd moved and hadn't paid any attention to the schools, and then found out that the school that our daughter was going to go to was like the second worst in the area.
Oh, we're going to get to hear the rest of this story in a minute. And while we're doing that, you can load up and dial 86. Come on, you got a story. We would love to hear it. Your testimony can encourage dozens, thousands maybe. 866-348-7884. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
Fall back. Car canopies today on the Christian Car Guy Show. You know, and especially since the leaves are changing, it's a beautiful time to be in your car. You know, what special, time did you have in your car canopy with God? One that sticks out that would speak to the fruit that God makes available to us. Sometimes just in the communing with him, just bringing the joy of, man, I'm just really loving your presence. 866-348-7884 is the number to call in and share. 866-348-7884. So when we left her hero Bill, school time was becoming a struggle for looking at your situation with your daughter.
Well, Bolton was like the second worst school in the school district, and it upset me so much we started praying and thinking about moving to a better school district. And every time I prayed about it, I would remember that my mother had gotten into the PTA, and between my time in the elementary, and they were back then the elementary schools in Florida were she was in the school system for like 10 years as either vice president or president, back and forth. And God just kept hitting me, you can't just run. And a wonderful educator, Dr. Short, was number 2 in the school system, and she decided to take over Bolton Elementary. So the year before my daughter started kindergarten, I started volunteering. And Dr. Short was great, brilliant. She went out and got all the really big companies in town to not only allow their employees to come tutor during the day, but tutor on the clock. So we had over 150 volunteers in there working with the kids. And the more I prayed about it, the more I got into it. We started a Cub Scout den in one of the housing projects. They started busing the kids from Kimberly Park over to Bolton Elementary School. So it set up a Cub Scout den over in that area to work with those kids. And it was just amazing. Every time I got prayerfully concerned about what we need to do next, in no time, God would have the phone ring, and it would just be the exact right person in the right situation. We ended up setting up another Cub Scout den in a Hispanic community next to Forsyth Tech. And I'd walked in, and there was a lady at the office. I'd never met her before, no phone call before. I told her that we wanted to set out a Cub Scout den in the community, and I was wondering if she had any ideas on how I'd meet the parents. And she says, "You want to set up a Cub Scout den in here?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She opened her drawer, pulled out a key, got up, walked over to a closet, handed me the key, and said, "This is your closet. You've got a key to the building, and you've got a key to this closet." Never met her before in my life. Yeah, but one miracle after another miracle after another miracle. It just was my assurance that I was doing what I was supposed to do under that canopy, using the skills that I had.
Yeah, isn't that just, you think about it, it's like, man, I need to find another alternative. But through prayer, God said no. Rather than curse the darkness, light a few candles here, Bill.
Well, I think the key is to say, God, what is it you want me to do today?
Right.
And if what you're doing is saying, I'm going to do whatever it is you put me in front of, that you see and hear and experience God in a totally different way than God, well, you could figure out a way to solve that problem. I don't want to have anything to do with but watch. Then you don't hear that message very much.
And the beauty of that, and I hope you're thinking of your story, because I want to hear from you. 866-348-7884, 866-34-TRUTH. Actually, before I speak to Bill, I have to tell you that on my way, I turned 70 on Thursday. And so I was just delighting, because I knew the title of the show already, and I was delighting in my ride. And I come from Stokesdale, North Carolina, into Winston-Salem, and I crossed Blues Creek Lake, and the steam was coming off the lake. It was a brisk morning, and so it was just drop dead gorgeous, and the trees were bright oranges. And I began to think about those leaves and how quickly a season, it wasn't long ago that, they were budding, and then they were flowering, and then the summer came, and now comes the fall. And right before they drop off, I was thinking they are the most glorious. Those leaves are the prettiest they have ever been. And as we think about the fall of our lives, sometimes those of us who aren't as young as we once were, it's like, man, it's like he's saving the best for last. Like, you can be the most glorious right there at the end. And I was just basking in that in my car canopy going, God, you are just absolutely, absolutely awesome. But the thing I can't help, part of the reason that I love grace so dearly is often I get to see it in people. And I have a funny way of looking at this, that if you're ever treated by somebody that doesn't treat you like you're their favorite, like you're special, like I believe in you, like I accept you, I want you, that's disgraceful behavior. I don't care who they are. In other words, if they don't treat you like Jesus would treat you, it's disgraceful, because he is going to treat you amazingly. Like, he is full of grace. And so, according to John, right, he's full of grace and truth, which is so helpful, right? And I don't know if you've ever received the truth in grace, just like, I have the perfect example. I had a friend by the name of Miss Beck, and she was 102 probably at this time this happened in this story. And I did a devotion at a nursing home there in Moxville. And she was a very, very kind woman. And she walked up to me after the devotional, and she said, Robbie, you are one of the most gifted ministers I've ever seen. It's always such a delight to come to one of your talks. I just can't tell you how I look forward to it, how much I enjoy it. And she says, and for that reason, I just don't understand why you would use the word golly. And I went, what? And she said, golly, it's a euphemism for God. And so she was speaking the truth in love. I mean, can you see it? The amazing grace when you see it in people that will speak the truth to you in love, but also people that will love on you just to love on you. Anything other than that, Bill, it's disgraceful. It's kind of scary to think the standard that we live under. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
Fall back. Car Canopies today on the Christian Car Guy Show. Fallback Car Canopies. And so, yeah, that is Frank Edwards with a Nigerian wedding dance. It is really a spectacular song. The more I listen to it, the more I like it. Because it is what we get to do is we get to enjoy that wedding dance with Jesus at whatever point in time that we begin this idea of grace and walking in it and reveling in it. And when you look at what Bill was talking about as I was listening, he goes into this school and shows amazing grace. He really does. He befriends these people. He befriends those young people, and what God did with those seeds that he planted. And so the more I've thought about this idea of grace, and the more I realize that all these spiritual gifts are to be ministered through it, and Paul explains that in Romans 12. But I love what Peter, who obviously grasped the idea as well. If you look in 1 Peter, it starts out with the idea. Remember what I told you? Anybody that doesn't treat you with unbelievable hospitality and love and admiration, that's not what Jesus would do. I mean, he just didn't that way. And so I love this. It says, but at the end of in verse 7 of 1 Peter chapter 4, it says, but the end of all things is at hand. Be ye therefore sober and watch unto prayer, which is what we've been talking about. And above all things, have fervent charity. Okay, you could translate that, have fervent love among yourselves, for love covers a multitude of sins. And then he says, use hospitality one to another without grudging. Again, it's grace. And every man hath received a gift. Even so, minister the same to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace. Do you hear what he's saying? That word gift, by the way, is charisma, which is also a spiritual idea. And so with this spiritual gift that you've been given, whatever that may be, it is part of the manifold grace. In other words, he chose you to understand that passage that you're going to teach on. He chose you to be able to sing that beautiful song that you were gifted to be able to sing. He chose you to lead that Cub Scout group. He chose you to take part in the Jesus Labor of Love or take part in the Christian Car Guy show. And he did that because he had faith. He did that because he loved you. And as we receive that love more and more in our canopies, as we receive that grace more and more, you can't give what you haven't gotten. And so if you haven't just basked in that love, if you haven't just basked in that canopy, it's going to be hard. It's real hard to love that person, because quite often hurt people. And so believe me, if you're in the Jesus Labor of Love, it's not unusual for a single mom or widow that's in the middle of a real crisis to want to take your head off. And when they do that, Scott is full of grace because he spends all that time with Jesus. And when you do that, you're able to see, man, forgive them, Lord, for they don't know what they're doing. You see, that's what happens quite often with hurt people. And you've experienced it, Bill. I know, working in the prisons and all those things that you've had a chance to do. Again, you were given the grace in order to do it. But yet with that comes these opportunities to show it.
Well, you experience God, he's actually there when you're doing things for him. So that's the biggest glory, the biggest warmth in my heart is when I'm praying how to help this person, and then it's absolutely obvious the answer shows up.
Yeah. When you meet Bill the first time, you aren't going to go, now this guy right here is the warmest person I ever met. I mean, he's just not, however, I've known Bill a long time. And one of my favorite Bill stories is the time that you had the homeless guy get in your car. And that's a good lesson for everybody, because this is a car show, so I think we got to tell that story, Bill. That grace can, you have to speak the truth in love sometimes, and you got to guard yourself. Yeah,
I came out of the Y one time, and there was this fella that needed some help sitting on a bench, and I sat down and started talking to him, and the more I talked to him, the more he sounded like a really good brother who had just lost his way. It turned out it was far, far, far different than that. I had to promise my wife I'd never just put anybody in my car again. So you got to have some discernment.
Oh, you got to tell more of the story than that, Bill. He gets in the car, then what happens?
Well, it's like the first time he needed a check cashed. So I take him to the bank to get this check cashed, and the whole time the story's changing a little bit. but it gets taken care of. The second time he shows up on my way to help build Habitat Humanity, I told him where I was going, and he just showed up. And the third time, I put him in the car to take him to the church to get some clothes from the clothes closet. And then the next time he showed up, and he had this check he want cashed, and it wasn't made out to him. So we're trying to find his what he claimed was his landlord, and it was just absolutely obvious that I'd been listening to these stories without discerning them properly. Well, it's the one time in my life I'm positive that I was in a car with somebody that had a demonic spirit in them. And the more he talked, the more I was heading to the police station parking lot is where I was going. And he grabbed the stick shift in my Toyota and looked at me and said, if you go in this direction any farther, I'm going to ruin your transmission. I just pulled over. It's you've got to be careful about what you do. I'm
in all circumstances.
In
right?
all
There you
circumstances.
go. So we have Jamal is calling. We would love your story as well. 866-348-7884. You're going to say, Bill?
The Jamal.
The Jamal, yeah. So, Jamal, you're on the Christian Car Guy Show.
Hey, guys. Hope you guys are doing well.
We're having a blast.
I can tell, as usual. Just wanted to touch on the topic today. You guys are talking about being disgraceful, right?
Right.
Okay, all right. Well, I feel utterly disgraced that I wasn't invited on the show with you guys.
A lot of thought went into not inviting you on the show. I got to say.
I may need
I
don't know.
I am
You don't
certain
even understand the topic of the show.
I invite every single listener, every single show, if possible, by dialing 866. So not only are you invited, your thoughts are welcomed, and I'm actually just more than delighted to have you on, Jamal.
Well, good. I'm
going to wait till he
man.
finishes making his comment before I chip in.
Classic Bill, never afraid to say what's on his mind. I like his no filter policy there.
You don't know how wrong you are.
I will certainly take that. So to actually talk about the topic, and I think it was talking about the canopy in your car and a God moment and all that.
Right.
All right, good deal. It was actually, going back to Bill, it was one of those times where I went on a hike with Bill Mixon.
Really?
And, he was gracious enough to invite me on a hike. And he says he's in his 60s or 70s or something, but he has a body of a 20-year-old because I was huffing and puffing like nobody's business. And he was like, come on, where are you going? Catch up. And I said, man, I can't keep up with this guy. So I don't know what he's drinking. I don't know if it's yoga, Pilates, or whatever. But
Holy Spirit, you weren't praying strong enough.
That via little faith, right?
So,
yeah, we went up there. It was a beautiful scene from the top to the bottom. Going up the trail, get to see all kind of good nature. Bill was pointing out some good flowers and plant life, being the good Boy Scout that he is. And, of course, at the top, it was just breathtaking. And I like nature. I like scenery and all that. But I was a little shaken being up there on that top with the wind blowing and everything. But I had to brave it because I had to get the shot, and it was just a good God wink, as I've heard, to seeing what God has created in the beauty of nature and life.
well, man, where did you guys go?
Linville Gorge. Didn't we go to Linville Gorge?
Yes, sir, we did.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
I was there yesterday.
I'm not surprised. That's gorgeous. Well, thank you for your call, Jamal.
My
Absolutely
pleasure. God
amazing
bless.
grace. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I know you got a story you're thinking about. 866-348-7884. We're graciously inviting everyone. We don't want to be disgraceful.
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
None of us taking
Fallback car canopies today on the Christian Car Guy Show. You know, it's really cool to think about, you know, the seasons and how it is fall. And of course, I don't want you to forget that, you know, you get to save an hour tomorrow, and you know, it is the fallback Saturday, so we don't want you to get to church at the wrong time. But meanwhile, you know, there's this sanctuary that we all have in our cars and other places. I hope you have them all over the place where you can just meet with God and focus in on Him and just bask in that grace as you do. You know, receive His word, whatever. It gives you more opportunity to give what you've had, right? And so I love, and I wouldn't mind somebody calling in on this idea. Who have you ever met that you, man, they were such a person of God that they made you feel so loved. They made you feel so welcome. And I give you the perfect example from my perspective is there was Pastor Mark Quartz was the pastor at Calvary Baptist Church. And of course, I didn't know that when we moved to Winston-Salem in 1993. My wife and I, we were told to go visit this church. And so as we're coming across the parking lot, again, at this point in time, they had 5,000 members or so. This man comes walking, he's a white-haired man, and he was just had this big old smile, and he was like, "Hi, I'm Mark, you know, and you are," and he introduced himself. "Oh, man, we're so glad you're at Calvary. You're going to love this church." And he went on and on. Couldn't have been any nicer. We were flabbergasted later on when we were sitting in the sanctuary, and he steps up, and he's the pastor, right? And I'm like, man, I just can't believe the enthusiasm. You know, he was so loving. But as cool as that was, and that was, you know, really a beautiful experience the first time we came to the church, about 5 weeks later, he bounds across the parking lot again. Only this time, he not only knew my name, he knew my wife's name, he knew my kids' names. He knew that I was working at Bob Neal Chrysler Plymouth Jeep Eagle at the time. And he was like, "Hey, Robbie, how are you doing? How are things going at Bob Neal and Tammy and Tess and Robbie?" Like, it was like we were his family. And it wasn't just like that the second time or the third time or the fourth time. But it wouldn't be unusual. Here he was, a pastor of a church with 4,000 or 5,000 people, to get a call. You know, "Robbie, you know, I'd really like to know what you've been going through. You know, what's going on?" And he just, and I can remember one time I shared a testimony with him. He goes, "Robbie, you need to go share that, man. You need to cast your bread upon the waters." I mean, he had all those elements that he clearly had been in the presence of Christ so much that he just exuded it. Right? That it just came out of every pore when you're around him. And it encourages me always to think, well, the more time I can spend there, the more that people will feel that way than when they're around me, right? That brings out the best in them. It's a neat thing, Bill. And how about you? Well, I'll tell you one we both knew was Ted Burton.
He touched thousands and thousands of people's lives, and the Christian Businessmen's Committee was one of those things that I fell into. God put me there, and there was absolutely no doubt that was important and in my growth.
I just think how cool it is that God put Ted Burton in both our lives, right? Or He put you in my life.
Now, the two that flashed to my mind was the president and the treasurer of Lees McRae College. H.C. Evans was one of those people that you could just, everywhere he went, he knew everybody and everybody knew him. And then the dean of finance up there, Roy Craigie, was one that sort of took me in tow and kept me out of trouble and taught. I learned more from him than I did all the rest of my college experience.
So that's cool that he met you there in college.
Well, I picked up the phone and called the college and said, "I want to work with Boy Scout troop. Does anybody up there know if there's a Boy Scout troop around?" And they said, "HC knows some. Hold on, let me get HC on the phone for you." And this nice gentleman came in and says, "Well, we've got a scout troop over at the orphanage. I'd love for you to come up and help." And I had no idea that he was the president of the college. So I get up to Lees McRae College. I ended up with the very best room in the entire college. Nobody could figure out how in the world it's like the president moved from his residence to a brand new one, and his old residence was turned into a dorm room, a dorm house. In any event, there are a dozen stories.
And that's a perfect example, right? You were
Yes.
highly favored, right? And so, as I told Bill at the beginning, that the Queen Esther, like it shares. If you look at Esther chapter 2, it says in the Robbie translation that she lifted up grace. It doesn't say, it says she obtained grace in most translations, but it isn't what happened. She already had grace, and so what she did was she lifted up grace. And so since Queen Esther was a HC and was a Dr. Quartz, she had that ability to just love on people. Why? Because she had obtained it. She had gotten it from God. And that with that, she was lifting it up. And it's amazing, the fruitfulness, right? You can see the fruitfulness of HC, or you can see the fruitfulness of a Mark Court, or the people that you may know that came to your mind. And when you think of that, it's the challenge to us, right, is how can we be that? Well, you got to spend time in that canopy with the one who can, who where it all came from, the source of it, right?
And you got to be willing to use it. You've got to ask God, what do you want me to do today? How do I use what you've given me? If you're not interested in using the gifts that he gives you, you don't realize you have them.
Right, and in fact, that's what exactly Peter said in 1 Peter. He said that you would be a steward of the gift, right? Well, a steward means that you're investing that gift. Right? He gave you the gift, and now how are you going to invest that for his kingdom and be the good steward that receives 10, 20, 50 times, what was sown? However that works, just that smile, right? That loving feeling of being around somebody that's full of grace.
We've got a responsibility to radiate Christ around us. That there's a reason we're here, and that reason is to share the good news of Jesus Christ with others, but to also lighten their load and to be a light on the hill and a time of refreshing. We're a tool that's supposed to be utilized. It doesn't do you any good to be the best tool in the box if it's hidden under a bunch of other stuff and it's never brought out and used. We should be looking for opportunities to make a difference in the lives of the people around us.
And as you said earlier, that the more time you spend in Christ, the more you feel his confidence, and the more he will bring it out in you so that you can bring it out in others. It's an amazing thing. It really, really is that I never would have done this. Never in a million years would I have gotten on the radio and spoke had Jesus not said, Robbie, I want you to get on the radio and talk about what breaks your heart every day. I mean, those were direct words that came, from the source of, and he was aware of gifts I had no idea I had. I had no idea that I could speak. I was a car salesman in my view, so it was that opportunity that came because of what? Spending time in that canopy. And spending time in his word is definitely a way to make all that happen.
And you also bump into some really powerful people that iron sharpens iron. If you're out there in the world making a difference, then the world's making a difference in you too.
Yep. Well, I hear the music in the background, which means don't have much time left. I want to remind you, as always, slow down. Jesus walked everywhere he went, got it all done in 33 years. While you're slowing down, don't forget to fall back and spend time in that canopy. Thank you so much for listening today to the Christian Car Guy Radio Show.